Very good morning to everyone. Let me first start with the dharma of entrepreneurs. When I joined Kotak Mutual Fund, this is what my boss told me and I am replicating what he told me. There are 4 quotients in life. One can be called Ram quotient. As all of you know from Ramayana, Bhagwan Ram was Maryada Purushottam. His objectives were always noble, honorable, and the means to achieve those objectives were always honorable. He will never take a shortcut in life, even if he had to give up on Sita Mata. Ideally, an entrepreneur should be like Bhagwan Ram, no shortcuts, honorable goal, and honorable ways to achieve it. But then we are all living in Kali Yuga. So there is a need for Krishna quotient. As you know, Bhagavan Krishna, goals were always set right, but means to achieve those goals were many a times compromised. It was important to kill Karna, so you ask Arjuna, go and kill him. And later on tell him that incidentally he was your elder brother. In Kali Yuga, because we are businessmen, we are entrepreneurs, sometimes we'll have to go into Krishna quotient. The third quotient is Duryodhana quotient. Duryodhana goals were always wrong, but his means were always honorable. Even when he was fighting for his life, he didn't hit Bhim below the belt. But Bhim had to hit him below the belt to kill him. So Duryodhana's goals were always wrong, but his means were always honorable. An entrepreneur should avoid the temptation of going into Duryodhana quotient. And finally there is Ravana quotient, where neither the goals nor the objectives are right. And which is where, despite his knowledge, despite his wealth, despite his wisdom, Ravan eventually got killed. His golden Lanka got destroyed. Ravan can have temporary wealth, but he won't be able to sustain over generation. And time and again, Indian entrepreneurs' history has told us that. So, as an entrepreneur, my recommendation will be try to be in Ram quotient as much as possible. Some excursion to Krishna quotient is acceptable in Kali Yuga, but stay away the temptation of Duryodhana and Ravana quotient. Thank you. Now, let me spend a few minutes on why this is the best time to be entrepreneur in India. I don't think so. Our father's generation or mother's generation had this kind of opportunity. And I don't think so. Our kids' generation also will have this kind of opportunity. We are the most luckiest generation from an entrepreneur point of view. Look at from a macro point of view. And I'm trying to portray this in lighter way, but that's no way to take away the seriousness of the message. There were movies like Mother India, Roti Kapda aur Makan, Kali Charan, where the villain was always black market. Now think which was the last movie where villain was a black marketeer. Now we have terrorists and politicians and others, but not the black marketeer. Why did this happen? Because India has transited from a high inflation economy to moderate inflation economy. This has happened because Reserve Bank of India has been mandated inflation targeting under Constitution of India. Today when people say India has high inflation, please remember that American inflation is even higher than India for last 6 months. And it is likely to remain higher for probably next 6 months. Pre-1990, to get FX, it was always a Hawala market. Any one of us who wanted to travel abroad, we had taken Hawala market or we were at the mercy of our relatives abroad. Today, how many of us have to go to Hawala market? We have transited from low FX reserves to high FX reserves economy. We are now 5th largest FX holder of the world at $630 billion. And if I take out Russian reserve, we are 4th largest. Third, there was a time when in India infrastructure was always short. Our ports were congested, our highways were congested. A travel time from Mumbai to Pune, which is about 140 kilometers, was overnight journey. And as a kid, when we were going on school picnic in the ghat, I always used to pray to the God ki sahi salamat pahuncha denge. Now, if I get out of Mumbai traffic, Mumbai to Pune journey is 1.5 hours. I still pray to the God when my wife drives because she believes cars can fly. But I reach Pune in 1.5 hours. Our ports, our power, our highways, they are all becoming infrastructure available. We are in infrastructure surplus. There are issues in railways and some other things. But we are moving from infrastructure shortages to infrastructure availability. And that's going to make a big difference. To give you a small example, our average goods train run at 25 kilometers an hour. Some of the marathon runners run faster than our goods train. But now on dedicated freight corridor, goods train will run at 75 kilometers an hour. This is how infrastructure is improving. The other thing is digital infrastructure. There was a colonial era reporter. He was posted in India for about 4 years. He couldn't find anything good about us, kept on writing bad things about India, and he was promoted and he was sent to France. The first tweet he made after reaching France, when I wanted to shift money from one bank account to another bank account in India, it was instant. The damn thing takes 3 days in France. 4 साल यहाँ पे रहा. He couldn't find a good thing. The moment he was taken out, he found everything good. This digital infrastructure is changing the entire Indian entrepreneurship. In US, in Western world, digital infrastructure is owned by private players. The payment network is owned by Visa and MasterCard. In India, payment system is RuPay and Bheem and UPI. It's a public highway owned by Government of India, Public of India. Any entrepreneur can build anything on it. I'm sure many of you will have NRI relatives, and those who are Gujaratis in the crowd will relate to the story I am saying. As a kid, when we were growing up, our NRI relatives will come, they'll give us some Cadbury's, some soaps, and they will always say, आपके इंडिया में ये और हमारे इंग्लैंड में, हमारे अमेरिका में तो ये. Throughout our upbringing, we suffered our NRI relatives. Last 2 years, पूरे 25 साल की भड़ास मैंने निकाल दी. When I said, तुम्हारे वहाँ पे तो वैक्सीन सर्टिफिकेट कागज पे देते हैं, मेरे यहाँ पे तो व्हाट्सएप पे आता है. 25 साल में सब पूरा करेगा. This digital infrastructure is changing entrepreneurship. Now, 2 big things are happening as we speak. One is the availability of capital. If my parent didn't have money, there was a very, very low chance that I could have become entrepreneur. Of course, there are exceptions like Kishore, who without parents' money can become entrepreneur, but I'm sure he struggled a lot. Today, fortunately, with God's grace, I have made enough money. But my daughters don't need my capital. If they have idea, they will go to venture capitalists like Gaurav Bhai and raise capital on their idea. This availability of capital is unleashing the entrepreneurship potential. My wife is a doctorate from IIT Bombay. Earlier, about 80-85% of kids were going abroad. Today, 80-85% of kids are staying in India to become an entrepreneur. This is our core talent. We were never short of talent, we were always short of capital. Combine them, you can create unicorns, dime a dozen. And finally, the mindset is changing with the government. We had a government which wanted to be a regulator as well as the player. In the football match, they wanted to be referee as well as the player. In cricket match, they wanted to be umpire as well as the player. That created nightmare. Today, finally government has accepted that they have no business to be in business. Our divestment is happening at a much slower pace, but it is happening. Now, just look at Air India. When it was with Tata's, it was still a niche airline, small airline. But it created an image for India. If you read the book Beyond Blue Mountains by R.M. Lala, there's an incident about Air India known as Tata Airlines then. A flight is landing in Zurich airport from Mumbai, and two Swiss men are talking to each other saying that what's the time? And the second person looks at sky and says it's 12 o'clock. And he said, how can you be so sure? He said, this Tata Airlines Mumbai Zurich flight is landing, it must be 12. This was the brand of Air India. If Air India would have remained Tata Airlines, will our tourism sector develop? Answer is undoubtedly yes. A small museum in Paris, Louvre, attracted more visitors than entire India put together. We needed many things, but of course we needed first a good airline. Now with Air India going back to Tata's, will our domestic tourism sector get a leg up? Will we get more tourists than Museum of Louvre or Singapore? There is hope. Put all these things together, inflation, moderation, high FX reserves, availability of capital, government becoming referee and not the player, availability of infrastructure, availability of digital infrastructure publicly owned, there would not have been better time to become an entrepreneur than today. And our feeling is that over the next 5, 10, 15 years, India will witness far bigger growth than what we have witnessed over the last 5, 10, 15 years. The wealth creation in the last 15, 20 years has been unprecedented if you back right entrepreneurs. In next 15, 20 years, also similar opportunity will be there. Either you become an entrepreneur or you back the right entrepreneur. Let me now come to the final part of my remarks. There is always opportunity and there is always doing a self-goal. My wife is a follower of Isha Foundation. She was in Coimbatore during Mahashivratri, and there was one bright kid of 17, 18 years roaming around saying that I have made 100 crore, I don't know what to do, how do I spend? So my wife came back and told me that this kid was, a bit obnoxious, kept on saying I made 100 crore, 100 crore, 100 crore. So I asked her, what's the name? It turned out that I knew the father. I'm a mutual fund manager, so all the HNIs of India, I keep a track of it. And I said, Kishore, this is the best time to congratulate the father. So I ended up sending a message that your son is moving in the right direction and he is following your legendary steps. And his phone call came, "Kya Nilesh bhai?" So I said, "Nee, sir, I heard from my wife that your son made 100 crore, that's why I'm congratulating." He said, "What is that, Nilesh bhai?" He invested in NFT, he sold and he bought and created mark-to-market profit of 100 crore. Now, this is the temptation to take a shortcut. This is the Duryodhan Ravan motion. Please don't step over there and ensure that your kids also doesn't step over there. There is enough opportunity on the other side in Ram and Krishna quotient to make money, to create wealth, to share that wealth. And I have no doubt in my mind that under the leadership of current government, the kind of reforms they have introduced, the kind of changes they are making is undoubtedly going to create a decade of India in terms of fastest growing economy in the world, in terms of highest wealth creation in the world. Thank you so much. The entire listed companies put together invest about $75 billion a year. In FY22, the PE and VC capital flows is likely to touch $70 billion. So all Tatas, Birlas, Ambanis, Adanis, ONGC, IOC, BPCL put together on one side, and the PE and VC industry put together on the other side, they are committing same capital to India in just 1 year. And if the trend continues, maybe the PE and VC industry will exceed listed India in probably FY23. That's the size. So if you look at availability of capital, it's driven by what was earlier known as central bank around the world, and now they are called printing presses. In 2008, the combined balance sheet of US, Japan, and European Central Bank put together was $5 trillion. As we speak, it is likely to cross $29 trillion. It is up about 6 times in just about 14 years. Rising tide lifts every boat, whether it's unicorn or sinking boat, everything gets lifted when this kind of money comes. The second thing is, few years ago there was something called BRICS. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. Now, unfortunately today, Brazil has fallen way behind. Russia has committed harakiri. South Africa, there are racial tensions and inequalities distracting investors. China has done extremely well from an economic point of view, but not from market point of view. MSCI China today is at the same level as it was in 1992. I'm repeating, in 2022, China's index is at the same level as it was in 1992. Now imagine how will investors commit their capital? Effectively, India has emerged as a preferred choice. And this is getting upped on something called ESG. The world is moving towards environmental, social and governance. And there's no price for guessing that among these BRICS on environmental, social and governance, we are coming right at the top. China didn't even attend COP26 summit. Brazil, Russia, South Africa attended but didn't make any commitment. India was the only emerging market country which went and said that by 2070 we will become carbon neutral. Now, these are the statements which lure or which enhances India's image and bring capital. So my feeling is that in this world of printing presses, we are unlikely to have shortage of capital. And like in March, April 20, what FPI sold about 69,000 crore in secondary market, in November, December 20, they came to buy it at double the prices. What they have sold between October 21 to Feb 22, about 1,50,000 crore. If Putin permits, in November, December 2022, they'll again come to buy at double the prices.
There are a lot of patriarchs and first generation entrepreneurs and first generation people who earn and set the tone for the generations to come. But a lot of wealth and a lot of creative foundation doesn't pass on to the second generation or the third generation. So do you think that the first generation gets lethargic after they succeed and they just want to rest, and that leads to a bad example for the next generation? And is that the reason, or what examples would you give to the first generation or the second generation entrepreneurs here who should continue the legacy of the similar hard work, the way they establish their businesses, the way they establish themselves for their children and the grandchildren to come?
So there are many things which impact outcomes, but the most important thing is that when baton passes from first generation to second or second to third, it should be based on merits, not based on who your father is or who your mother is. We have seen many a times that the first generation is truly entrepreneurial. The second generation, if it has worked with the first generation in building, they inherit the same traits. And the third generation, which has been brought up in too much of richness, actually does not have meritocracy to run the company, but because he is father's son or his grandfather's son or daughter, they end up running the business. So if you are passing the baton to meritocracy, I think first, second and third and fourth and fifth, every generation will work. Now, this is the commercial answer. There is also a spiritual answer. Today, if we see one family which can go back to Aurangzeb's time, roughly about 16th century, and they have remained wealthy, that's the Lalbai family. Their grandfather Shantibai Javeri was considered financial to Mughal emperors. And even today, Lalbais are one of the largest textile organizations. Generation after generation, they have maintained wealth. There are very few families in the world which can have that kind of track record. In the base of Lalbai family is spiritualism. One of the elder family member always works for the Anandji Kalyanjini Pedi, which runs Jain temples all around the country. So maybe there is an answer in having spiritualism and meritocracy. Both combined will ensure that wealth keeps on passing from one generation to another. I think, there was a question asked by Uday Kotak to RBI governor. आज फिर जीने की तमन्ना है, आज फिर मरने का इरादा है. On the face of it, it looks like आज फिर जीने की तमन्ना is optimistic and मरने का इरादा is pessimistic. But when you go one step beyond, you realize that जीने की तमन्ना is optimistic and मरने का इरादा also is optimistic because you have achieved everything in life. It's time to go to nirvana. It's moksha. So neither Vishnu nor me have felt different things. Just go one step beyond. You realize both of us are eternally optimistic. They have already done Jan Dhan Yojana, which has allowed people access to the banking system. Now it is time for us to do Jan Nivesh Yojana, which I have recommended partly because I am from mutual fund and we will benefit out of Jan Nivesh, and partly because that is the right thing to do. Today, bottom of the pyramid people's savings is allocated mostly towards instruments which are not outperforming inflation. You will keep money at home, you will keep money with Saraf or Vichy, chit fund. More than 1.8 crore Indians have lost close to 1,80,000 crore in last 2 decades through this collective investment scheme. And it's not people like us, it's the people who are our driver, maid and servants. So if we can launch a Jan Nivesh Yojana whereby ease of doing investment happens and we can move these people from below inflation return to above inflation return. Let me end this with this incident. All throughout my life I have told people, please do SIP, please do SIP, please do SIP. There's this bank manager in Axis Bank whom I had met when I was working in Axis Bank a decade ago. And he started SIP for his driver. The driver worked with him for about 54 months, 2,000 rupee SIP, 54 into 2, 1,08,000. When he left, the SIP money continued in the mutual fund. About a year back, he was getting his daughter married. Obviously went to invite this gentleman and also with the hope that वो 1 लाख रुपया मुझे मिल जाए. When the statement of account went to him, it was about 5 lakh rupee. And आँख में से आंसू आ गए कि मेरी बेटी की शादी का खर्चा पूरा निकल गया. And see, that is where I get satisfaction. I have made money for people in crores. But the satisfaction when I made that gentleman's 1 lakh, 5 lakh rupee, I don't think so there's anything that's equivalent to it.